So the other big talking point coming into this weekend, of course, we mentioned a couple of times in previous podcasts leading up to the season, is new faces. So last year, obviously, for the first time in Formula One history, we had no changes of the grid between season to season, 2023 to 2024. There's a lot of changes mid-season, and a lot of changes post-season. We have six new drivers, technically, officially classed this year as the class of rookies doing their first full season. So they vary, I suppose, is the fairest way of putting it in terms of where the cars are likely to sit. I think it's perfectly fair to say that Kimi Antonelli and or Liam Lawson will probably score the most points of the six newbies this year. But in terms of like all things considered, with their cars, the positions, the expectations on them, and where they should finish, Coops, who are you most excited to see this year, and who do you think is going to have, all things considered, the best year of the six newbies for this year?
I do like Bortoletto, and I think there'll be. I think Bortoletto's in the best place because he's in a car that's awful,
Mm.
and everybody knows the car's awful. Audi are so far behind them where they should be for next season, it's unreal. So he's going to have a great year because it's
Mm.
a year of zero expectation. Go out there and enjoy it, and people around F1, especially a lot of our fans, you can still see when a driver's good, even in a car that's not good.
Mm.
Um, so I'm interested to see how that'll work out. I'm kind of interested to see how Bearman will do now that it's not just super sub, that he's now a driver. I mean, he's not going to do a Nick De Vries because Nick De Vries was signed on one race. He's had a couple of races.
Mm.
Nick De Vries was never going to do what Bearman did in that Ferrari at Saudi. So be interesting. But yeah, but probably Bortoletto and Bearman, and I'll keep an eye on them all. To be honest,
Mm.
I think the one that I've got the least kind of interest in and really following is probably Liam Lawson. More because he's done quite a few races.
Mm.
So I'm at that point when I'm like, yeah, well, you're in the point, so you kind of should be.
Do you think
You're
he's got the
fourth.
most pressure on him?
No, Doohan has.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Just because of
Right,
Colapinto waiting
oh,
in the
no,
wings.
yeah, Doohan's already been kind of told he's getting sacked before he's been told he's getting sacked. He's not
Mm.
even turned a real. He's not even had a race yet, and that's a horrible situation for a driver who has talent,
Mm.
but he's went into a situation that, I mean, he can't control it. That's the worst part. All these decisions and moves have been made before he's had a chance to prove himself, and sometimes even standing there, and he could be the next coming of Verstappen. And Alpine might not even notice it
Mm.
because it seems like there's an element of stubbornness around what they're wanting to do with their drivers. That they've kind of already made their mind up that they've made the wrong choice with doing, so they're getting things ready to ship him out at the first opportunity.
Mm.
Uh, so yeah, I think he's the one that's, and I mean, if he finds that car in third or second, some sort of weird ass shenanigans over the weekend and gets himself right up into the podium spots, or even within touch of distance of podium spots. That's he has to do that kind of miraculous driving pretty much all season before they actually go, do you know what, you're fine.
Yeah, I think this weekend, like again, testing is testing, but the one thing you can compare like to like is how Alpine reacted to testing this year versus testing last year, where the car was heavy, so heavy that it wasn't allowed to have any damn paint on it. This year, it's very damn colorful. So right off the bat, it's a small thing, but that actually that screams a lot in Formula One terms. That last year they'd no paint, this year they've been able to paint it. They've got their shit together. The car looked a little bit more stable. Gasly looked pretty happy with it. And it's reckoned from all the podcasts and all the journalists and all the pundits and all that it's between them and Williams in terms of that best of the rest fight for fifth kind of thing, fifth of the constructors. So that's points. That's 8th to 10th in this
Mm-hmm.
race. And if they're in around that, if he gets in, if it ends up being Gasly, Sainz, Albon, Doohan, that looks bad for Doohan. But if it's Gasly, Sainz, Doohan, Albon, that looks good for Doohan. As
Mm-hmm.
far as I see it, he needs to be within that margin of reasonability of Gasly, as they all sort of do. But I think, like you said, especially for for doing. Amy, what do you reckon? Who are you most looking forward to seeing out of the rookies, and who do you think is going to have the best and hardest time of it this year?
I think I'm looking forward to see Bortoletto just because I really like his driving style. I really have enjoyed watching him grow as a driver, so I'm really excited to see him in Formula One. I kind of have similar feelings in terms of Doohan. I feel like he's not really been given a fair draw.
Mm.
There's, I think, excess. It doesn't help that the media is basically saying that he's out of a seat before he's even driven in the car. And I don't think it's really fair on him. But hopefully he'll take it more in his stride and maybe prove that he deserves a spot. Maybe that's how he'll look at it. But I also think he may go under pressure. For Kimi Antonelli, I actually think he might be one to watch. I'm just scared I don't know if he's too young. I don't know what it is about him. I'm just really worried that maybe it was too soon to go into Formula One. But if he can pull it off this season, there's a star on your hands there. I will say that. Liam, though, I'm not a huge fan of his, but I'm quite a big fan of Red Bull. So for Red Bull's sake, I hope he does well. To be honest, he has to do better than Perez. I mean, anyone really could at this point. So that's not hard. That's not a hard challenge. But with his aggression, I don't know how that will react with Max, because I feel like they've got both a bit of an aggressive driving style. And if Red Bull do have a dominant car again, Liam's not going to be one to move over. Especially, he's young, he's hungry, and I like that about him. I don't know how that dynamic will work, because we all know Red Bull are definitely going to prioritize Max, but it'll be up to Liam what he does on track. But yeah, I guess it's a really exciting season though, because I just love the fact that we've got so many rookies. And I honestly hope they do have a good season, because it'll push for more teams to put younger drivers into the seats and kind of get those younger drivers that have been waiting in the stands for ages for a drive. Maybe it gives them a chance. Maybe more teams will take risks if a lot of these rookies pull off.
Yep, I think so too. I that's a really, really good point as well. It's that take the chance on the young drivers, because, I mean, historically it's gone usually quite well. Lewis Hamilton, Sebastian Vettel, Max Verstappen, Fernando Alonso, all these young drivers who came in were taking a chance on it, a big team, partnering an established driver, all of them blew them away and went to win championships, all of them. Is this class of rookies going to win championships? Possibly not. I like Gabriel Bortoletto a lot. I think he's really, really good. I think your point to Kimi Antonelli is an interesting one. I think because Mercedes have flown under the radar a bit, he's gotten to fly under the radar a bit. None of the story has been around him, despite, Netflix doing their very, very best to suggest that he's the next thing. Him and George have, are going to fight over Lewis's dominance or anything like that. It's ridiculous. Personally, I don't see it yet. I look forward to seeing it, but the first time he sat in a Formula One car, he was quick and then he binned it through absolutely no fault other than his own. When he didn't need to, it was practice. I think you're right. I think it's too soon. I think he's too young. I think he's too small. Literally, I think he's too small. I think Yuki Tsunoda had the same problem and he had to bulk up. I think Kimi is quite literally too small, especially for a front-running Formula One car, which it will be. And again, just that jump straight into the what Toto Wolff thinks will be a winning car. What Toto Wolff will expect to be podiums and wins, and will be disappointed it's not. George Russell, you had the reigning GP3 and then GP2 champion, and he dumped him in a Williams for 3 years. I just can't wrap my head around how last year they had the opportunity to put Kimi Antonelli in the Williams, do exactly what George did, but put him in a better situation than George was in, let him learn off a better driver than George ever got to with, Alex Albon, and take Carlos Sainz for 2 years. I still can't wrap my head around that. I hope Kimi can do it. He seems like a cool customer, but I think that pressure is that's just so much on him. Coops, where do you think Kimi Antonelli will finish this season?
Well, he's not finishing the best rookie.
You think Lawson will outdo him?
Lawson potentially, yeah. I think Lawson's probably the only one that will on machinery alone, but as you say, there's a lot going in. I mean, the boy's fast, according to Mercedes. He's really fast. He's got a lot to learn. As you say, he's quite a slight build. There's a lot of forces going through a driver, especially on long runs. You know, it's a very much an unknown quantity, and as Toto Wolff just been like, well, look, we know we lost Hamilton, but we didn't really need them anyway. Look, we've got Antonelli. It's kind of that hoping for the fact that he is the next Verstappen or he is the next, world superstar that's going to take over Formula One. I just don't see it.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it is. I just don't see it. It was a bit like when Mick Schumacher came in, people were like, oh, it's going to be amazing. I'm like, where? How? When? I was never sold on Mick Schumacher, ever.
Mm.
And eventually everybody cottoned onto it. But, when you see someone like, when Piastri came in, you just thought, oh, there's something. There's an indescribable thing when you see a driver who's just good.
Yeah.
It's like, I remember, I'm old enough to remember when Fernando Alonso debuted in Formula One. And I was like, oh, even when I was young, I was like, oh, there's something about this guy.
Mm.
There's something like, probably one of the best drivers to not win a championship was Juan Pablo Montoya.
Mm-hmm.
If he'd stuck out with Formula One, he would have won a championship. When he came in, part of it was his attitude, because he didn't care that Michael Schumacher was there at the height of his fame. He's like, I don't care. I'm going to do what I'm going to do. But Antonelli doesn't have that. Everyone else is saying he has that, but I'm not seeing it. And maybe I'm missing something, but there's something that's I'm just not getting it.
Well, you're not the only one. I remain to be. There's no doubt the kid is fast. Like I saw him in Formula 2 last year, and I watched Formula 2 all year. And he and Bearman had issues with the frame throughout the first half of the year. Fair enough, the team seemed to be struggling with those new cars. But once they got it together, like, he was quick, he was making overtakes, but he was also making silly mistakes. And yeah, okay, he's a kid, he makes silly mistakes, but we always talk about, like, do certain drivers deserve the step up from Formula 2 to Formula 1, and those who don't, why did they not get it? And interestingly, the one driver we haven't spoken about at all, and sort of, I think, falls into this, is Isack Hadjar, who was runner-up to Bortoletto only just. Like, Bortoletto just pipped him at the end. It was, what, like 6 points? It was really close. And yet, he is totally unrated. I personally, I don't rate him all that much. He had a good team around him, and his qualifying was okay, and he was in positions to score points all the damn time. I don't see him outscoring Yuki Tsunoda. I think he's one of those, like, he got the step up, really? Like, over the drivers that haven't in the past? You look at your Robert Schwartzmans, your Callum Islets, there's loads of drivers. Oscar Piastri sat on the sideline. Felipe Drugovich is still on the sidelines. And I just think Kimi, I think he's above that level, but he's not he's not Oscar Piastri, he's not George Russell and Lando Norris, or even Alex Albon, who just have that extra thing. And even though all those drivers I mentioned, of all those drivers who came in at a young age, only Lewis Hamilton went straight in his rookie season into a top car. Fernando Alonso came in a shit car and vanished for a year and then came back. Sebastian Vettel went in what was supposed to be a crap car. It was a crap, the BMW and then the Toro Rosso. He just happened to win a race in them. Who else we mentioned? Like I said, George Russell was in Williams.
Weber was in a Minardi.
Weber was in a Minardi. Max Verstappen got to go and crash left, right, and centre in a Toro Rosso for a year and a bit. I just don't. I think this is just Toto Wolff playing I have to do something. I need the media attention. I haven't won a championship in years. Look at me. Stop looking at Christian Horner. I think it's just a wild overreaction, because any other reasonable person would have looked at Carlos Sainz and say, be in my car, I'll pay you all the money.
Of course, especially for a couple of years.
Yeah.
In a Mercedes with George Russell. Like, it's like I say, there's a snap judgment there. And there's an air of stubbornness around Wolff. It's that old adage of, I support Kilmarnock Football Club and we're not going through a particularly great season. And there's question marks around our manager, and it's like he's trying to be smart when a situation when it doesn't need to be smart.
Mm.
You just simplify it. We're not having a great season. He's playing players out of position. And it's like, go back to basics, be simple. It's play football. And it's the same with Formula One. And in this situation, like Wolf should have looked at what we had, right? So we have an unknown rookie who's fast but crashy and a bit, but he probably has something in it. The data's shown he's pretty decent. We've got Carlos Sainz,
proven race winner and the only person to
proven
beat
race
Max
winner.
Verstappen in 2023.
Yep, who knows what he's doing. There's, and could there have been a conversation? I don't think there was. The way that the Total Wolf went on, it was Antonelli. It was always going to be Antonelli. And maybe he's doing that to cover. Maybe he's doing that to say it, and there was some quiet conversations. But in this modern iteration of Formula One, quiet conversations have a tendency to eventually come out. So I don't think there was ever any conversation with Carlos Sainz. And as you say, it's a pretty stupid thing to do. You're kind of setting the kid up to fail in one respect. You're setting him up to hopefully be good, but there's a higher chance he's going to fail.
But there's also just an unbelievably steep learning curve for him. He was barely in Formula 2. He wasn't in it for long enough to make any sort of difference. He certainly wasn't fighting at the front long enough for it to count. Like, again, you look at George Russell, he won GP3, he went straight into GP2, and he won that as well. Same with Oscar Piastri. He won F3, he went straight into F2, he won that as well. And he had that momentum, and he had that, right, I'm ready to go. And then both of them just sort of had to flounder for a bit. Kimi hasn't done that. He hasn't done that sharp edge. Oh, but yes, he won some Formula 4s and stuff like that, but who hasn't who's come into Formula 1? I'm sorry, I don't mean to obviously I haven't won any Formula 4. I'm sitting here behind my keyboard saying this. But this is Formula 1. They're supposed to be. They're the 20 best drivers in the world and the billionaire's son. 19 best drivers in the world and the billionaire's son. But Formula 4 is not a marker for Formula 1. Even Max, like all the questions around Max Verstappen was, it's way too soon. He at least was not put into the top car until he had got a little bit crashy out of his system and proved his worth, at least, and shown them the spark and showed that he could do it in Formula 1. Same with Fernando Alonso. Same with Sebastian Vettel. Lewis Hamilton was a risk that Ron Dennis took, and it paid off. I just don't know. But Kimi Antonelli is not Lewis Hamilton. Lewis Hamilton is like the rest of them. He dominated his junior categories. His 2006 GP2 championship was spectacular. If you ever want to see how good Lewis Hamilton was as a kid, I'm sure most of our listeners have probably already watched this. Go watch Turkey 2006 for GP2. It's on YouTube. It was a masterpiece. He was such an incredibly talented kid, so it was right to take that risk on him. Kimi Antonelli has not done that to that level. Not even remotely close. He just hasn't. And yeah, I think you're right. I think he's setting him up for failure, and it's that stubbornness, because there's no way if a conversation happened with Carlos Sainz, he didn't say, yes, I'll have your seat for 2 years, please. And you can even put a contract that if Kimi dominates in Williams for a year, I'll feck off. I just don't see why Carlos Sainz would have said no to that ever. But sorry, also the steep learning curve is he comes into this car that he's no real experience with other than binning it on lap 2, learns it for the whole year, and then next year steps into essentially a completely different category again. There's just so much pressure in what should be a top winning team. So much pressure. It's too much pressure for an 18-year-old, I think. I hope he proves me wrong. I hope he proves us all wrong. For all we know, he's going to win on Sunday and will look really stupid. But I just, there's so much pressure on a kid.
I mean, it's for me, it's opinion. I just don't know what it is that I'm missing out on. But like you say, it's that gut thing. And I mean, he might win on Sunday. It wouldn't change my opinion, because there's a lot of drivers out there that have won a race here or there. Gasly's won a couple. I think is Ocon won one.
Ocon's won one. Gasly's won one.
So Gasly did look good.
Pastor Maldonado won a race.
Yeah, I mean, we all know how good the driver that man was. Jesus. Lance Stroll came close to winning one.
Yes, he did. Twice.
So, it's a lot easier to win a race than be a contender for multiple championships and being seen as a front runner. And you could go in through all your formulas and won everything. I think Stoffel Van Dorn done brilliant in
everything.
F3, F2, won everything, came to Formula One. And yes, okay, the McLaren was an absolute dog, but he didn't set the world alight. Nobody looked at him and went, yeah, he's a great driver. He's just in the wrong machinery. It just didn't click. And as you say, there's so many things going against that man. And, part of me would have liked to have seen Toto Wolff kind of deflect away from Antonelli, but not big it up as much as he's done. Like
that's part of it as well, isn't it? That he's bigged it up. Amy, I'll bring you in on this. What do you think of Toto? Just like again, just I know we're spending a bit of time on Kimi, but it's going to be a talking point this weekend if he doesn't perform, and it's all come from Toto Wolff.
I think he's taken a risk. I think he wanted his own Max Verstappen, and if it plays off, he will run with it. He'll be like, "See, I told you this would work." But if it doesn't, I think he's taking risks because he compares himself so much to Red Bull. I've never seen such a big he cares so much about what the media thinks about him. I think the last few years have been tough, and I think it's showing. But I do genuinely think that Kimi does have a chance this year. It was a rash decision. I do not believe Carlos Sainz should ever have got dropped from Ferrari. So I think Carlos Sainz even being dropped from Ferrari was bizarre. But I don't know why he didn't go to Mercedes. And my only thought would be that Toto Wolff already had his eyes on Kimi and wanted this plan to all go through. But he wants his own Max Verstappen, and he's going to try his very best to make Kimi the next Max. And I can't see that happening.
The question also arises is, okay, I'm not saying that George is as good as Max, but he has him. He has his Max. He has the kid whose raw talent came through, won everything, plied his trade in the crap team and was stepped up to the big team. It's not George Russell's fault that he was put up a year too late, because realistically he should have been put up. He shouldn't have spent that third year in Williams. They should have dropped Bottas a year earlier, but they didn't want to risk Lewis not winning that title. It's the only reason I'm ever able to think why he wasn't promoted earlier, because if he'd been promoted into that all-conquering Mercedes, I don't know if he'd have beaten Lewis, but he'd have certainly given him a run for his money. And it probably would have been a three-way fight for that title. And maybe we'd have had 3 stacks on top of each other in Monza instead of just the 2.
Mm-hmm.
But he has his talented mid-20s leader of the team, super excitable, championship quality, champion-winning quality driver. I don't know why he needs to put that on the head of an 18-year-old.
It's interesting, to be honest, his thoughts behind this. I think, but if it does play off, I will give credit to him for that. It'll put Merc back where it needs to be, but he also can't replace, I don't think George or Kimi are really replacing Lewis. I think it's a really harsh thing to ask, and I think the only person that I could potentially say is that George is probably the one that's more stepping into Lewis's shoes than Kimi is, because I think the only thing I will say is that Kimi is coming in and replacing Lewis Hamilton, but really George Russell's replacing Lewis Hamilton and he's replacing George, and we really do need to look at it like that.
Exactly.
Because I've seen so much things online, like how can you replace a 7-time world champ with an 18-year-old and I'm just like, but they're not they're not they're replacing George in a way. They just they have to fill that seat, and I think George will step up to that number 1 driver. And I'm hoping they've not, because if Kimi doesn't do well and this is a bad season, because I actually do think Kimi would be a good Formula 1 driver, I just don't think now is his right time. And what would be so painful is that he has the worst season ever and then loses his shot at Formula 1 full stop because he went up a year too early.
Yep. And you look at how many drivers, Stoffel Van Dorn, as Coops mentioned, is a good example of that. Alex Albon got lucky that he was brought back, but that happened to him too. He was lucky that someone else took a chance on him, but he got that promotion too early and it ruined his career. It nearly ruined his career completely. It certainly ruined his career with Red Bull. Again, Pierre Gasly got promoted arguably too early, and both of them were in Formula 1 already, and there's still the call that they were promoted too early. Danny Kvyat, Brendan Hart, the amount of they're usually Red Bull drivers. The only driver you could say that Mercedes promoted at the exact right time is Valtteri Bottas, actually. And they just they had to do that, but they'd done it right with him in that they put him in Williams for a couple of years, and then he was ready because Williams had been up and around and he'd got a podium, I think, with Williams, and he was ready to take that step up. George was ready a year earlier than he was put up. Kimi has nothing on him. But you're right, he is replacing George. He's not replacing Lewis. And we will at least parrot that line correctly. Like, I completely agree with you. I think that's the absolute right way to look at it. George Russell has replaced Lewis Hamilton at Mercedes, not Kimi Antonelli.